Imagine sending a text message, streaming a video, or even just talking on the phone. It feels absolutely seamless, doesn't it?
Oh, completely.
Like magic, almost. But what if I told you that the very foundation of how all these digital marvels work, how we even begin to understand what information is, in a quantifiable sense, stems from a single, groundbreaking paper written almost 80 years ago?
A paper so fundamental, it really did give us the blueprint for the digital age.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Deep Dive, the show where we take complex ideas and unpack them for you. I'm Alex, your guide to the big picture and the why it matters.
And I'm Jordan, here to simplify the intricate mechanisms and connect the dots. Today we're embarking on a deep dive into one of the most impactful research papers in computer science, truly a foundational text.
Yeah, one that quite literally laid the groundwork for the digital age we live in.
We're going into C.E. Shannon's A Mathematical Theory of Communication, originally published in the Bell System Technical Journal back in 1948.
Okay, so definitely not recent by typical tech paper standards.
No, not at all. But its impact is continuous and, frankly, profound, making it incredibly relevant even today.
I'd say it's more than just relevant. It's like the Rosetta Stone of modern communication. It defined the very language of bits and bytes before most people even knew what they were.
Absolutely.
This paper isn't just some historical artifact. It's really the DNA of our digital world. It's this invisible but absolutely essential layer beneath everything we do online, every text we send, every video we stream.
It's what allowed us to stop seeing communication as this sort of vague art and start seeing it as a precise, measurable science.
Okay, so what problem was Claude Shannon actually setting out to solve with this massive work?
Well, at its core, the problem was quite simply defined in the paper itself, reproducing at one point either exactly or approximately a message selected at another point.
Right, getting a message from A to B sounds straightforward enough.
It does. But here's where Shannon's crucial, almost revolutionary insight came in. He made this vital distinction. He said, and I'm quoting here, "Semantic aspects of communication are relevant to the engineering problem."
Semantic aspects.
Yes.
So the meaning.
Exactly. The meaning of the message, whether it's a love letter, a top secret government memo, a stock market tip, or just a cat video, it just doesn't matter for the engineering task of transmitting it.
Yeah.
The significant aspect, as he put it, is that the actual message is one selected from a set of possible messages. The system, he argued, had to be designed to operate for any possible selection from that set, not just the one that would actually be chosen later, because you don't know the specific content when you're designing the communication system.
Right, you build the pipes before you know exactly what water will flow through them.
Precisely. It was a radical idea at the time to completely decouple meaning from the mechanics of transmission.
That feels almost counterintuitive, doesn't it? For us, communication is all about conveying meaning. But Shannon's stroke of genius was to say, look, for the engineering problem, let's set meaning aside. It's like designing a post office. The designers, they don't care if your letter is a love poem or a grocery list.
Right.
Their job is simply to ensure that a letter, whatever its content, gets from point A to point B reliably. Shannon basically stripped away the what it means to focus purely on how much of it is there and how much of it can we reliably send.
And that wasn't just some philosophical distinction. It was the engineering breakthrough that unlocked universal digital communication. It freed system design from the specific content it would eventually carry.
So engineers could build robust networks that didn't need a complete redesign every time someone invented, I don't know, MP3s or JPEGs.
Exactly. The underlying principles remain the same because Shannon focused on the universal aspects. Before him, engineers were largely optimizing specific communication systems in isolation. Radio people worked on radio, telegraphy people on telegraphs, telephone folks on phones.
Right, separate silos.
Totally. They completely lacked a general theory that could be applied across the board. It was a bit like having these isolated islands of knowledge with no bridges connecting them.
Or like trying to build different types of cars without understanding the fundamental laws of physics and mechanics first.
That's a great analogy. Each new system was kind of a bespoke solution to a specific problem. There was no overarching framework for comparing them, for understanding their fundamental limits, or seeing how an innovation in radio might actually apply to, say, telegraphy.
Which sounds incredibly inefficient.
It was. And it really stifled fundamental progress in communication science. This lack of a unified theory became increasingly obvious, especially with the growing interest in new modulation methods emerging from places like Bell Labs.
Like what?
Methods like pulse code modulation, PCM, and pulse position modulation, PPM. These were innovative techniques that, as Shannon noted, fundamentally exchange bandwidth for signal-to-noise ratio.
Okay, what does that mean in simple terms? Trading one resource for another.
Pretty much. They could trade off bandwidth. Think of it as the width of the communication pipe for signal clarity or signal-to-noise ratio. So you could maybe use less bandwidth but get a noisier signal, or use more bandwidth for a cleaner one. Engineers desperately needed a way to quantify these trade-offs universally.
To know if a new system was actually better overall or just different.
Precisely. Was it a real improvement or just a different set of compromises? Now, important groundwork had been laid by figures like Harry Nyquist and Ralph Hartley. Hartley, for example, introduced the idea that information could be measured logarithmically based on the number of choices available.
Logarithmically.
We'll come back to that. We will. But Shannon's clear intent was to extend the theory to include a number of new factors, and these factors were absolutely crucial.
Such as?
In particular, the effect of noise in the channel, which is always present, and the savings possible due to the statistical structure of the original message.
The statistical structure, like patterns in language.
Exactly, and also due to the nature of the final destination of the information. These critical elements, especially noise and the statistical patterns within messages, were either just vaguely considered or totally unquantified before Shannon. He was building a truly comprehensive theory.
You can really feel the historical moment, can't you?
Sure.
Post-World War II, electronics are advancing rapidly. There's this burgeoning interest in digital computing, data transmission.
The need was immense.
The practical need for more efficient, more robust communication systems wasn't just big, it was exploding. The world felt like it was shrinking, communication was getting faster, but it was all, as you said, a bit messy.
Yeah, disorganized.
Like building a house without really knowing the principles of physics. You might get a structure up, right?
Yeah.
But you wouldn't truly understand its limits or how to make it genuinely stable, resilient, or efficient under different conditions.
That's it.
Shannon steps in to give us the blueprints, not just for one specific communication system like a better radio, but for the underlying principles of any information structure.
He provided the universal laws, if you will. It wasn't about building a slightly better telegraph. It was about understanding the fundamental nature of telegraphic communication, and by extension, all communication.
Which, thinking back to those earlier approaches, they often made unrealistic assumptions, right?
Right.
Like treating all messages as equally likely.
Exactly. Or they just ignored the impact of noise, which is, of course, an ever-present reality in any real-world channel. That was a major blind spot. Messages have statistical patterns, and channels are inherently noisy.
You mentioned telegraphy earlier.
Right, take telegraphy. Operators intuitively knew to use shorter symbols for common letters, like a single dot for E, while less frequent letters like Q, X, or Z got longer sequences of dots and dashes.
Makes sense.
It does. It's an empirical optimization. But it wasn't mathematically rigorous, and nobody knew if it was truly the most efficient way possible. Shannon sought to formalize and generalize those kinds of savings that come from the statistical structure of language. He gave us a mathematical way to quantify redundancy and efficiency.
And the environment he was in, Bell Labs, that must have been critical.
Oh, absolutely. Bell Labs at that time was this incredible intellectual crucible. It brought together brilliant minds from physics, mathematics, engineering, all collaborating. Shannon's paper didn't appear out of nowhere. It built on those earlier ideas.
But he was the one who pulled it all together.
He was the first to unify them into a single, cohesive, comprehensive mathematical framework. He provided the formal definitions, the theorems, that would fundamentally redefine communication. It elevated it from a practical art almost to a rigorous science.
A classic example of basic research driven by curiosity, ending up having these world-changing practical implications.
Precisely. Far beyond what anyone, probably even Shannon himself, could have fully grasped back in 1948.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit more. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of Shannon's approach. How did he actually build this universal theory? What were the fundamental pieces?
He started by laying out a generalized communication system. He illustrates it with a really clear schematic diagram, his famous Figure 1. And this system, he proposed, consists of 5 essential parts, regardless of the type of communication.
5 core components. What are they?
First, you have the information source. This is what produces the message or sequence of messages you want to communicate.
So the person talking, the computer generating data?
Could be anything. A sequence of letters in telegraphy, a continuous function of time like sound pressure in radio or telephony, or even complex cases like color TV signals. The key is that it selects one message from a whole set of possibilities.
Got it. Number 2.
Second, the transmitter. This operates on the message to produce a signal that's suitable for transmission over the channel.
So it can convert the message into something that can travel.
Exactly. In a simple telephone, it's just changing sound pressure into an electrical current. But in more complex systems, like, say, pulse code modulation, it's a whole series of steps. Sampling the signal, compressing it, quantizing it.
Quantizing, what's that?
It means assigning the sampled values to a finite set of digital levels, then encoding those levels into binary digits, into bits. It's the crucial translation step.
Okay. Source, transmitter, what's third?
Third is the channel, simply the medium that transmits the signal from the transmitter to the receiver.
A pathway. Wires, radio waves, fiber optics.
Could be wires, coaxial cable, radio frequencies, a beam of light, anything. It's where the signal actually travels. Fourth is the receiver.
Which does the opposite of the transmitter.
Performs the inverse operation, yes. It attempts to reconstruct the original message from the signal it receives. It has to decode, dequantize, decompress, reassemble, put it back into its original form.
And finally,
the fifth part is the destination. The person or thing the message is intended for, the human ear listening, a computer processing data, a TV screen displaying an image.
source, transmitter, channel, receiver, destination. A universal flowchart.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And Shannon classified these systems into discrete, continuous, and mixed. Discrete is where both message and signal are sequences of distinct symbols, like telegraphy or computer data.
Zeros and ones.
Right. Continuous is where both are treated as continuous functions, like traditional analog radio or TV. And mixed systems combine both, like sending digitized speech over an analog radio channel.
And he started with the discrete case.
Yes, crucially, the paper starts with the discrete case, builds it as a solid foundation before extending the principles to the more complex continuous world. This modular breakdown allowed for that truly universal framework.
So it's not just a postal service analogy. He literally built the logical architecture for how information flows, no matter its physical form.
That's a great way to put it.
And central to this is how we measure information. You mentioned Hartley and the logarithmic measure earlier. Shannon adopted that, calling it the most natural choice. Why logarithm? Why not just count symbols?
That's an excellent question. It gets right to the heart of why Shannon's approach was so powerful. There are a few key reasons. First, from a practical engineering standpoint, it aligns perfectly with how many physical communication parameters behave.
Like what?
Things like time, bandwidth, the number of relays in a circuit. They tend to vary linearly with the logarithm of the number of possibilities. For instance, add one more relay, you double the number of possible states. But in log base 2, that just adds 1 to the capacity. Simple linear relationship.
Ah, okay. Makes the math easier.
Much easier. If you double the transmission time, you might square the number of possible messages you can send. But the logarithm just doubles. Again, linear. It's much easier to work with.
Makes sense. What else?
Second, it just feels more intuitive. You kind of feel that 2 identical punched cards should hold twice the information of 1, right? Or 2 identical communication channels should have twice the capacity of a single one.
Yeah, that additive property.
Exactly. That linear scaling works perfectly with a logarithmic measure. If you have 2 independent sources, the total information is just the sum of the individual information amounts. Logs do that naturally.
And the third reason.
Third, it's just mathematically more suitable for the kind of statistics and limiting operations Shannon was doing. The complex equations become much simpler and more elegant when you use logarithms. It allows these general theorems to emerge more clearly.
So it wasn't arbitrary at all. It was deeply rooted in the physics and math of how information behaves.
Precisely.
And this leads us directly to the fundamental unit of information, which Shannon, getting a suggestion from John Tukey, called the binary digit, or
more briefly, bits.
bits. It's so simple. A
Yeah.
device with 2 stable positions, like an on-off switch, stores 1 bit. N devices store n bits. Log base 2 of 2 to the n is just n.
It's elegantly simple, and it underpins absolutely everything digital, from the smallest byte in your phone to massive data centers.
So if you have, say, 8 possible messages, all equally likely.
Choosing 1 gives you log base 2 of 8, which is 3 bits of information.
3 yes-no questions to figure it out.
Exactly. Or, if you have relays, each relay's on-off state is 1 bit. It directly quantifies the uncertainty resolved by making a choice.
Okay, so we have bits. Now, how did Shannon describe the source that generates these bits? Or symbols? You mentioned statistical structure.
Right, the discrete information source. This is where he really brought probability and statistics into communication theory rigorously. He defined a source as a stochastic process.
Stochastic, meaning random, but with probability.
Yes, it generates symbols according to certain probabilities. And crucially, these probabilities can depend on the preceding choices. It's not necessarily just independent coin flips. This allowed for mathematically modeling complex systems, including natural language.
How did he illustrate that?
He used several great examples, adding complexity step by step. First, imagine independent, equiprobable symbols. Say a source chooses from 5 letters, A to E, each with an equal 0.2 probability, independently every time.
So just random noise, basically.
Pure random sequence, like
Yeah.
BDC, BCEC, CCA, DC, BDDD, AAE. No pattern you can really exploit.
Okay, what's next?
Next, B, independent, varying probabilities. Still independent choices, but the probabilities differ. Maybe A is more 4, B is 0.1, C is 0.2, and so on. The typical output subtly changes. You'd see more A's. A, C, D, C, B, D, C, E, A, D, A.
Still random, but with a bias.
Right. You see a shift in the overall distribution, but still no real local structure or dependencies between letters.
Then it gets more interesting.
Much more interesting with C Markov process or dependent choices based on betagram frequencies. Here, the choice of a letter depends only on the immediately preceding letter.
Like in English, Q is almost always followed by U.
Exactly. That's a strong dependency. Shannon defined this using transition probabilities, PAJ, the chance that letter I is followed by letter J. This introduces significant structure, even if it's limited to just the previous letter. The example sequence he gives starts looking less random. A, B, B, A, B, A, B, A, B. You can almost feel a rhythm emerging.
Okay, and he took it further.
Yes, to D, word-based stochastic processes. He considered processes generating sequences of whole words. These words could be chosen independently based on their frequencies, or, more complexly, with word transition probabilities, the choice of a word depends on the preceding word.
Getting much closer to actual language now.
Much closer. The example sequence is still artificial, like dad e a b deed, but the building blocks are more meaningful. You start hearing echoes of real language structure.
This is truly fascinating. It's like Shannon is playing digital Frankenstein, building these artificial tums just by tweaking the statistics to understand how real language works.
That's a perfect description. It's not just about individual letters, it's about the patterns between them, the dependencies.
And this leads to that amazing part of the paper, the series of approximations to English. He takes a 27-symbol alphabet, 26 letters plus space, and shows how adding statistical structure makes the output look more and more like real English.
It's a brilliant demonstration. You can literally feel the language emerging.
Okay, walk us through it. First, the zero-order approximation.
Pure random gibberish, equal probability for each letter and space. XFEML, RX, KHR, JF, FJUJ, ZLPW, CFW, KCYJ. Utterly unpredictable.
Right. Then the first-order approximation.
Still independent choices, but now using the actual frequencies of English letters. E is common, Z is rare, OCR, HLI, RGWR, and Melwis, EULL.
Still looks like nonsense, but maybe slightly less harsh.
Exactly, a faint whisper of structure because the letter counts are right. Then, the second-order approximation.
This uses D-gram structure, pairs of letters.
Yes, the probability of a letter depends on the one just before it. Common pairs like TH, E, and ER start appearing more often. On E, ansoutnes are T and torsine.
Okay, now it's starting to look like something, maybe badly typed, but you see fragments.
Noticeably more coherent. Next, the third-order approximation.
Depends on the previous two letters. Trigrams.
Correct, trigram structure. In no islatway cratic frobers, this is surprisingly closer. Your brain starts trying to find words like of the or action.
It really does. Okay, then he jumps to words.
Yes, the first-order word approximation. Words are chosen independently, but with their correct frequencies in English. Representing and speedily is an good apt or come.
Like reading random words from a dictionary, grammatically unconnected.
Exactly, just a bag of English words. But then the second-order word, approximation.
Where the choice of word depends on the previous word.
Yes. And this is astonishing. The head and in frontal attack on an English writer that the character of this point is therefore another method.
Wow, that sounds almost real. It flows.
It's remarkably close to coherent English, even though it was generated purely statistically. It's hard to believe a machine just spat that out based on probabilities.
You really do feel the language emerging, gaining structure bit by bit, word by word. It's like watching linguistic evolution sped up just by layering on these statistical dependencies.
And Shannon himself noted how the resemblance increases quite noticeably at each step. He mentioned that for the second-order word approximation, sequences of 4 or more words could often be placed in sentences without sounding too strained.
It's such a powerful illustration.
Yeah.
It shows how much the complexity we see in language stems from these underlying statistical patterns, how much is actually predictable.
It's a brilliant conceptual experiment, and it leads directly to perhaps the most famous concept from his work, entropy.
Right, entropy. Not like thermodynamics entropy, but information entropy.
Related conceptually, but specifically defined here as a measure of choice, uncertainty, or, maybe most powerfully, the information produced by a source.
How's it calculated? I remember the formula looks a bit scary.
The formula is h-k pi log pi. But let's break that down. Pi is just the probability of each possible symbol or event. Log pi is its logarithm. You multiply them, sum them up for all possibilities, and stick a minus sign and a constant k in front.
And k just sets the units, like bits if we use log base 2 and k1.
Exactly. What the formula essentially quantifies is the average surprise or newness per symbol from the source. The more choices you have and the more equally likely they are, the higher h is. More uncertainty means more information is generated when a choice is made.
So if one outcome is certain,
And its probability p is 1, all others are 0. Log 1 is 0, so h equals 0. No uncertainty, no information. If a coin always lands heads, watching it flip tells you nothing new.
And maximum uncertainty.
Maximum h happens when all n possibilities are equally likely. P1, then h equals log n. A fair coin flip n2 p e 0.5 has h log 2 1 bit, the maximum for 2 outcomes. That famous graph, figure 7, shows this perfectly. The uncertainty curve peaks right at p 0.5.
And knowing something can't increase uncertainty.
Correct. Shannon states, the uncertainty of y is never increased by knowledge of x. Learning about one thing can only decrease or leave unchanged your uncertainty about something related. It confirms h as a solid measure of information.
So less predictable equals more information. A random sequence has high entropy, a repetitive one has low entropy. It's about the reduction of uncertainty when you receive the message.
That's the core idea. How many options did receiving this message rule out? That's the information content.
Okay, so that's the source and its entropy, h. What about the pipe it goes through the channel? Especially a perfect noiseless one first.
Right, the discrete noiseless channel capacity, C. This measures the maximum rate a discrete channel can transmit information flawlessly.
The channel's speed limit.
Essentially, yes. For a simple teletype system, say with 32 symbols, all taking the same time, and any sequence allowed. Well, 32 symbols is 2 to the power 5, so each symbol carries 5 bits.
Log base 2 of 32 is 5.
Correct. If the system sends n symbols per second, the channel capacity C is simply 5n bits per second. That's its absolute maximum possible rate.
But what if symbols have different durations, like Morse code dots and dashes? Or if some sequences are forbidden?
Then it gets more complex. C is defined as the limit, as time t goes to infinity, of log nt divided by t. Here, nt is the number of allowed sequences of duration t.
So you have to figure out how many valid messages you can build in a given time?
Exactly. It often involves some heavier math, solving equations related to the constraints. For that telegraphy example Shannon uses, with specific rules for dots, dashes, and spaces, the capacity C comes out to about 0.539 bits per unit of time. The constraints definitely reduce the capacity.
Which makes sense. Rules slow things down.
They limit the possibilities.
Okay, so we have h for the source's information rate and c for the channel's maximum rate. This leads to a big theorem, right?
A monumental one. The fundamental theorem for a noiseless channel, Theorem 9. It states, let a source have entropy h bits per symbol and a channel have a capacity c bits per second. Then it is possible to encode the output of the source in such a way as to transmit at the average rate ch symbols per second over the channel where a is arbitrarily small.
C divided by h symbols per second.
It is not possible to transmit at an average rate greater than ch.
Wow. Okay, hold on. This is huge. It's saying if you know how informative your source is and how much your channel can carry, C, you can calculate the absolute maximum speed.
Yeah.
And crucially, it says such an efficient coding exists, you can actually reach that limit or get arbitrarily close.
That's a perfect summary. It's a landmark result. It implies that by properly encoding the messages, you can hit this theoretical speed limit for lossless communication.
How does that proper encoding work?
It effectively matches the statistics of the source to the capabilities of the channel. High probability messages get shorter codes. Low probability messages get longer ones. Like Morse code, but mathematically optimized.
You gave an example.
Yes, with 4 symbols A, B, C, D, with probabilities 12, 14, 18, 18, the entropy H calculates to 74 bits per symbol. And he shows a simple code, A0, B10, C110, D111.
Short code for high probability A, longer for C and D.
Exactly. And if you calculate the average bits per symbol using this code and the probabilities, it comes out to exactly 74 bits per symbol. Perfect match. Maximum efficiency for that source.
It's like that optimized shipping company again. Knowing package weights, entropy H, and truck capacity, channel C, they pack perfectly to maximize deliveries.
A great analogy. This theorem gave engineers a target, a mathematically proven peak performance to aim for in designing communication systems. No more guesswork.
Okay, but that's the ideal world. Noiseless channels. Let's get real. What about noise?
Right, the noisy channel. Shannon recognized that any realistic system has perturbations. The received signal isn't always the same as the transmitted one, and crucially, he distinguishes noise from mere distortion.
What's the difference?
Distortion is predictable, consistent. You could, in theory, build an equalizer or an inverse filter to undo it. Noise, however, is a chance variable. It's random, stochastic. It introduces unpredictability.
Static on the line, not just a muffled voice.
Exactly. And a noisy channel is described mathematically by transition probabilities, PJ. That's the probability that if you send symbol I, the channel noise causes it to be received as symbol J.
So if I send a 0, there's maybe a 99% chance it's received as 0, but a 1% chance it flips to a 1.
Precisely. And because it's probabilistic, you can't just deterministically reverse it. You have to deal with the uncertainty noise introduces.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because real-world channels are always noisy to some degree. Static, interference, dropped packets.
Always. There's no escaping it entirely.
This inherent imperfection is what Shannon tackled next, and it's arguably his most impactful contribution for the digital world we actually live in.
Definitely. This leads to the concept of equivocation, written as h sub y of x or high yx.
Equivocation sounds like ambiguity.
That's exactly what it measures. It's the conditional entropy of the original message, given that you've received a certain signal, y. It quantifies the average ambiguity, the uncertainty that remains about the original message, even after you've received the potentially noisy signal. How much information did the noise destroy or obscure?
Can you give an example?
Shannon gives a great one. Imagine sending binary digits, zeros and ones, at 1,000 symbols per second. Each is equally likely. But due to noise, 1 in every 100 symbols gets flipped on average.
Okay, a 1% error rate.
Right. So your first naive thought might be, okay, the rate is 1,000 symbols minus 10 errors. So 990 bits per second effective rate.
Seems logical.
But Shannon points out, no, that's not right. Because it fails to take into account the recipient's lack of knowledge of where the errors occur. You don't know which 10 bits out of the 1,000 were flipped. That uncertainty costs you information.
Ah, okay. It's not just the errors, it's not knowing where they are.
Exactly. He pushes it to an extreme. What if the noise is so bad the received symbols are totally independent of the sent ones? You just get random zeros and ones at the receiver.
Then you're getting zero actual information through.
Right, even though by chance about half the received bits would match the sent bits. The naive calculation would give you 500 bits sec, which is absurd. You could just flip a coin at the receiver and get the same result.
So the real measure is the remaining uncertainty. How does equivocation quantify that?
In the 1% error example, if you receive a 0, the probability a 0 was actually sent as 0.99, and the probability a 1 was sent and flipped is 0.01. Using the entropy formula on these a posteriori probabilities gives you the uncertainty after receiving the 0. Averaging this over received 0 and 1s gives the equivocation h high x.
And the value.
For the 1% error rate, it calculates to about 0.081 bits per symbol. This is the average uncertainty introduced by the noise per symbol received.
So the true rate isn't 1,000 minus 10 errors, it's 1,000 minus the equivocation.
Exactly. The effective rate is a 1,000 minus 81, which is 919 bits per second. That 81 bit sec isn't just the errors, it's the information lost due to the uncertainty the noise created.
That makes so much sense. It's like that person reading a book but mumbling every 10th word. It's not just the lost words, it's the uncertainty they inject into the whole story. You have to factor that ambiguity in.
That's a perfect analogy.
That uncertainty, the equivocation, it's the cost of correction. It's the amount of, wait, what was that again? Data you'd need to perfectly fix the message.
And Shannon actually proved that with Theorem 10. He showed that if you wanted a separate correction channel to fix the errors, its capacity would need to be at least equal to the equivocation, high x, to get the error rate arbitrarily low.
So equivocation is literally the information cost of fixing the noise. Amazing.
It quantifies the damage done by noise in information terms.
Which brings us to the biggest theorem of all, the one for noisy channels.
The fundamental theorem for a discrete channel with noise, Theorem 11. This is arguably the centerpiece of the whole theory.
Okay, lay it on us, but maybe gently. It sounds profound.
It is, it states. Let a discrete channel have the capacity C and a discrete source the entropy per second H, if H AC.
So if the information rate is less than or equal to the channel capacity.
There exists a coding system such that the output of the source can be transmitted over the channel with an arbitrarily small frequency of errors, or an arbitrarily small equivocation.
Wow. So even with noise, you can achieve essentially perfect communication as long as you don't overload the channel.
As long as H is not greater than C, yes. You can make the error rate, or the remaining uncertainty, as close to zero as you desire.
That feels almost counterintuitive. Noise is always there. How can you beat it completely?
Through clever coding, redundancy added in just the right way, but the theorem continues. If HC.
If you try to send information faster than the channel capacity.
It is possible to encode the source so that the equivocation is less than HC plus A, where A is arbitrarily small. There is no method of encoding which gives an equivocation less than HC.
Okay, so if you exceed the limit C, you will have leftover uncertainty, equivocation. And the minimum amount of that uncertainty is basically the difference between how much you tried to send H and the channel's limit C.
Precisely. H minus C is the unavoidable information loss rate if you push too hard. The theorem sets an absolute unbreakable speed limit, C for reliable communication over a noisy channel.
That is truly groundbreaking. It says noise doesn't have to win as long as you respect the limits.
Exactly. The diagram in the paper, figure 9, shows this beautifully. It plots input rate, like H, against equivocation. There's a line representing the limit C. Any point in the achievable region means you can trade rate for lower equivocation, but you can hit zero equivocation if your rate H is below C.
Nature demands payment, as Shannon put it, if you exceed C. That payment is irreducible uncertainty.
That's the idea. Now, the proof itself is ingenious but non-constructive. Shannon didn't give a specific practical code. He proved such codes must exist by averaging over a huge class of random codes. If the average error rate is tiny, at least one code in that set must be that good or better.
An existence proof. He showed the destination was reachable, even if he didn't provide the exact map.
Correct.
It's like the garden hose analogy again. If the hose capacity C is 10 gallons a minute, you can get 10 gallons reliably, HHACC. Try to force 11 gallons HC, you'll inevitably get 1 gallon of splash and mess, HC equivocation, that you just can't recover.
A very good analogy for the core concept. This theorem gave engineers that ultimate goal. Reach C, and you conquer noise.
Oh, did Shannon admit this was maybe hard to do in practice? The proof sounds complex.
Oh, absolutely. He was very clear about the limitations. The paper explicitly states an attempt to obtain a good approximation to ideal coding by following the method of the proof is generally impractical.
So he proved it's possible, in theory, a vital North Star, but didn't hand over the easy-to-build instruction manual.
Not at all. That task, finding practical codes that approach the Shannon limit, spurred decades of research in coding theory, leading to things like turbo codes and LDPC codes that get remarkably close now.
Why was the proofs method impractical?
I mentioned it often requires a very long delay in the transmitter and receiver to do the complex encoding and decoding needed for these near-random codes. And it's related to the sheer difficulty of constructing sequences that truly behave randomly in the way the proof requires.
So the theory pointed the way, but the engineering challenge was immense.
Exactly.
This brings up something else interesting Shannon discussed. Redundancy. We usually think redundancy is bad, wasteful, but he showed it's actually useful.
Hugely useful, especially for combating noise. He estimated English language is roughly 50% redundant.
50%? How did he figure that out?
Through several clever methods, including a fascinating guessing game experiment, he'd have people guess the next letter in a text. The easier it was to guess, the more redundant the text was. If you can often predict the next letter, it's not carrying maximum information.
And this redundancy helps us understand noisy messages.
Absolutely. If you took English text and randomly deleted half the letters, Shannon argued, experts could often still restore the original message because the remaining letters provide enough context thanks to the language's inherent structure and redundancy.
Right. It's why we can understand text messages with typos or decipher a crackly phone call. Our brains use the expected patterns, the redundancy, to fill in the gaps or correct the errors.
Precisely. Think about basic English with its limited vocabulary. It's highly redundant. Translating normal English into basic English often makes the text much longer, showing the original had compressible predictability. Conversely, something like James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake tries to cram in maximum meaning with minimum redundancy.
Which is why it's famously difficult to read.
Exactly. Redundancy is a natural error correction mechanism. If English had zero redundancy, like those purely random sequences, a single error would be catastrophic. Redundancy provides robustness.
Fascinating. Okay, so Shannon laid the foundation for discrete systems, noisy and noiseless. Did he tackle continuous signals too, like radio waves?
Yes, he did. Parts 3 and 4 of the paper extend the theory to continuous channels. This was crucial for things like radio, TV, and analog systems. The main challenge, as he points out, is fundamental. Quote, a continuously variable quantity can assume an infinite number of values.
Meaning you'd need infinite bits to specify it perfectly.
Exactly, and requires, therefore, an infinite number of binary digits for exact specification. So exact transmission is impossible with any real channel that has finite capacity.
So how do you handle continuous signals then?
The solution is practical transmission to within a certain tolerance. You don't aim for perfection, but for an acceptable level of approximation. This is measured by a fidelity evaluation function, like the common root mean square RMS error, which quantifies the average difference between the original and received signal.
So it becomes about minimizing the error, not eliminating it entirely.
Precisely. It's about rate distortion theory, which Shannon essentially founded here. How much rate, bits per second, do you need to achieve a certain low level of distortion or error?
And did this lead to another famous result?
It led directly to perhaps the most famous formula in all of communication theory, Theorem 17, the Shannon-Hartley theorem.
Yes. The big one for continuous channels. What does it say?
It states, the capacity C of a channel of band W perturbed by white thermal noise power N when the average transmitter power is limited to P is given by C equals W log 2 P plus NN bits per second.
Okay, C equal W log base 2 of P plus NN. Let's break that down. W is bandwidth.
Right, the range of frequencies, how wide the pipe is.
P is signal power.
How strong your transmission is.
And N is noise power.
The background interference level.
So this incredibly elegant formula ties together bandwidth, signal strength, and noise to give you the ultimate speed limit for that channel.
Exactly. It tells you the theoretical maximum data rate you can reliably push through that noisy continuous channel. It's foundational for basically all modern telecommunications.
It explains why engineers are always trying to increase bandwidth, W, boost signal power, P, or find ways to reduce noise, N, to get faster internet, clearer calls.
Because the Shannon-Hartley theorem tells them exactly how those factors interact to determine the ultimate capacity C. It's the speed limit sign for every communication highway.
And what did it imply about the type of signal needed to reach that limit?
Another fascinating insight. To approach this limit C, the transmitted signals must statistically resemble white noise.
Meaning they should look random.
Yes. To pack the most information efficiently, you don't want predictable patterns in your signal. You want it spread out randomly across the available bandwidth. Predictability implies redundancy, which means less new information per unit time.
So the most efficient signal looks like noise to someone who doesn't have the key to decode it. Counterintuitive again.
It really is. Efficiency comes from unpredictability.
Wow. So beyond these specific, incredibly powerful formulas and theorems, what would you say is Shannon's overarching legacy?
I think it's giving us a universal way to think about information itself. He fundamentally shifted our perspective. He took information from being this vague concept tied to meaning and turned it into a measurable, quantifiable entity, a fundamental currency of the universe almost.
It paved the way for, well, everything digital, didn't it?
Pretty much. Data compression algorithms, how your phone stores photos efficiently using JPEG or music using MP3, they rely on removing statistical redundancy, just like Shannon analyzed. Error correction codes the magic that makes your Netflix stream robust against network glitches. Or ensures data stored on a hard drive survives minor flaws they work by adding redundancy back in a very clever, structured way based on his principles.
The very architecture of computers, the internet, digital communication, it all rests on this foundation of quantifying information and understanding channel limits.
It's the core conceptual framework behind how we convert everything, images, sound, text, video, into those fundamental bits and back again, reliably and robustly. Without Shannon's mathematical theory, we might still be struggling in a largely analog world, battling noise without a clear map of its limits or how to navigate them.
It's hard to imagine our modern world without it. So looking forward, what doors does this research still open? Can we ever actually hit that Shannon limit in practice?
Well, hitting it perfectly with practical constraints like finite delay and computational complexity is still incredibly challenging, maybe impossible in some theoretical senses, but the theory constantly pushes us closer.
We keep inching towards it.
Exactly. Every new generation of Wi-Fi, 5G, 6G, every advance in fiber optics or satellite communication, they are all, at their heart, engineering efforts to get just a little bit closer to that fundamental limit defined by Shannon. It's a continuous journey of innovation guided by his mathematical truths.
And the ideas might apply even more broadly, information in biology or physics.
People are certainly exploring those connections. How do biological systems process information so efficiently? What are the informational limits in quantum mechanics? Shannon's framework provides a powerful language for asking those questions, even outside traditional engineering.
So to recap this deep dive, Claude Shannon's 1948 paper, A Mathematical Theory of Communication,
Fundamentally transformed our understanding of information. It separated information from meaning to quantify it, using concepts like entropy and the bit. And it defined the absolute limits of communication channel capacity, both for ideal noiseless channels and, crucially, for real-world noisy channels.
It gave us the mathematical foundations, the very language for the entire digital age.
Absolutely.
So next time you send a text, stream a movie, or even just listen to a friend, maybe even listen to this, consider that invisible dance of bits happening behind the scenes, constrained by fundamental laws that Claude Shannon uncovered nearly 80 years ago. And maybe ask yourself, what really are the ultimate limits of what we can communicate? And what does boiling everything down to pure information reveal about the nature of reality itself?
A profound thought to end on.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep digging into the knowledge.